Hi, today we're talking about trauma processing from the brain's perspective, and we're going to get into this and see what happens, see what this is all about, why this is important. And my intention by the time you're finished with this is that you feel inspired and even excited about this. This is such a powerful thing, and I want you to see what's going on in the brain and behind the scenes, because this also is the stuff that is the markers that will show you this is working. And it's also the markers that will show you if you're in one of the places I'm going to talk about here, you're going to know what you need to do. And it's usually trauma processing. And so I want to make this not a scary thing, not a painful thing, regardless of what experiences you've had with this, because there's gnarly ways to do this. You can really have big setbacks, and this can be really done wrong and poorly. And if you've had those experiences, I'm so sorry for that. And that I don't want you to let those stop you from the amazing things that happen during trauma processing. And so that's what we're doing today. So I'm Rachel McLeod. I'm a mental health therapist and an emotional wellness coach and a therapist, mentor, practitioner, mentor. And I specialize in helping people do the brain work for resolving symptoms of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress. Often, even, I also specialize in working with people with complex PTSD, so complex issues of these. And the brain has a really beautiful process for resolving these symptoms and disorders, and it's actually already trying to do that, but this process gets stopped and blocked. And so if it's stopped and blocked, you don't get the benefit of healing and you don't heal. And so then you're noticing symptoms looping, symptoms growing, symptoms showing up in more and more areas of your life because your brain literally cannot go through its process to resolve those. So my entire work has to do with getting that process unblocked, unstopped, and moving. Okay. And I'm not going to talk about how that occurs today, but it's very simple. I teach 4 strategies of this, 3 of them for free in my free program, Interventions for Inner World Transformation, that I encourage you to grab a hold of. We are working with a different part of the brain to unblock this process. It's very different than talking strategies, thinking, or reasoning strategies. We're going to send safety signals through that begin in the body, and that part of the brain will pick up and respond to and shift out of survival mode into processing mode. That is simple. It actually requires the least amount of skill to use these interventions, and there's no known side effects with the ones I'm sharing in my free program. I have another one that does have side effects. I teach that later on in my process I've developed for resolving these sorts of disorders. And so that's also available on my website. That's called Inner World Transformation. So I have a process for this, but we're not talking about that today. I really want to get you excited about trauma processing. And this is a thing your brain and brains do naturally. They just need the specific support that brains need to get this process unblocked and moving forward. Okay, so that's the blurb about there's a process for this. It's different. Okay, let's dive into what happens with trauma and trauma processing. So, if you've had a traumatic experience, it's traumatic because it was painful, and it doesn't matter if it was a big T trauma, which are things like wars and traumatic events like accidents and violations and things like that. I don't want to use triggering words here. So I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down. So big T traumas, those are like oh yeah, that's traumatic. This is also small T traumas, which are being rejected, being made fun of, being bullied, being not having what you need, being neglected. Those sorts of traumatic experiences are painful in the brain. They cause the brain to shift out of processing and healing mode and into survival mode. How am I going to survive this moment? Okay, and we want and brains that get the support they need to get this process unblocked in these moments. Maybe you had a friend or a parent that really saw you and supported this process. Maybe you got some hugs. Maybe you got some tea. Maybe you guys went for a walk. Whatever you did, but it was enough support to the survival system part of the brain that it shifted into processing mode, and your brain learned, okay. we're surviving, but now it's okay. We can process, we can relax, we can learn how to be in the world, even though this traumatic thing happened. We can figure out how to be safe, right? Sometimes when traumatic events happen, the brain can't finish that. And so we stay in survival mode. The brain doesn't know that it can't go through its process of figuring out, are we safe now? If we are, how are we going to be in the world while there's problems, or while this thing could happen again? What if we're rejected again? What are we going to do? Like it needs to go through that process. I'm going to talk about that a lot in more detail so you get that. But really, brains that can't make that shift just stay in loops of we're in danger. We could get rejected here. We could be unwanted. We could be bullied. We could have one of the big T's happen again. Big traumas, big T traumas. Right? There could be an outbreak of violence here. There could be a violation, right? We stay in that even though time and maybe decades have passed since the event. And inside we're like, just knock it off. We're safe. It's fine. It's over. But our brain hasn't gone through its process of understanding that. So it's still in hypervigilance. You're still recalling flashbacks, which are actually the brain's effort to heal itself. And that's not finishing and it's not resolving. And we want it to. Okay. So, and the key here is we want processing. Okay, that's all we want. We want processing. We want to shift the brain into a processing state. The brain will sort this out itself if we can just make that shift. Okay, so when we're in a traumatic experience, this is what's happening in our brain. Not after a trauma that's not being processed or that is about to be processed. I want to talk about this and outline this from the moment up until we start processing. I want this to happen immediately after traumatic experiences. But we're not fabulous at putting in the right ingredient for brains to heal traumas. And so sometimes it takes a while for that ingredient to show up. And so sometimes a traumatic experience will happen and people will just make it worse and dysregulate us further. Right. And so then our brain is like, well, we got to keep surviving. We got to keep surviving. It's not safe yet. Okay. And so, but it doesn't matter when this happens. And by the time people are working with me, these traumas haven't healed. It might be years, it might be months, it might be decades. And we're going to shift over into processing mode. So the timeline here doesn't really matter. But we're talking about what happens before processing. Okay. And you can see why you really want to be able to support your brain as quickly as possible in the moment. Okay. And there's a lot of natural ways we can do this. And by the time we get to needing to see Rachel, that ship has sailed, and we really want to be able to find an intentional way of doing this. I want to say so many things about that. But you know what? I'm not going to. But what I will say is that the better we get at, even if we have to artificially put this in and we get to see the brain work, pretty soon our system is learning, oh, you just need to provide safety and comfort and brains heal. And so then this spreads to our children because we start providing this in other ways. And this is my vision for healing the world, is that we start to share safety again. And anyway, so you can see why I want to just totally dive off into that. But I'm not going to. I'm pulling myself out. Let's go back. So up to the moment. Oh, let me show you this. Okay, so after I have diagrams that I have personally drawn, so you can see my art skills. Okay, so this square represents the trauma. And what's inside the square is a lot of things, but all these squigglies are the emotions. This is what you will deal with first. And this is the hardest thing for brains to deal with. And so that's why we want to process the emotions here. In the middle of processing, when processing occurs, you start to get something like this, right? And at the end, you get this. This means nothing to you yet, but you're going to be a huge fan of this in just a moment, okay? Okay. Before processing occurs, right, we're going to put processing in here, and I'm going to show you what shows up at the end. In the beginning, we have a traumatic event that's not getting processed, and we have all the emotions. And then we have emotional reasoning. And then we have emotional-based judgments. And then we have stories that we're making up. based on our emotions. This is not a reality space where the brain is not being able to weave with reality, because the only thing it can focus on are the emotions. So really the only thing it has to build with is the emotions. And then we get problem solving. And so our brain is making emotional problem solving. Uh, this is tough because it's going to loop. And the more it's happening, the more it's looping. As a matter of fact, I want to show you one other drawing I have here. And what's challenging about this not getting any better and just being based on, and you see in here, there's so much other data and information. You can't see this, but imagine with me. There's so much more data in here. But it's like the brain gets blind to it because all it can see is the emotions. And you can be like, there's more. See, this is what happened and we're safe. We made it out. But the brain hasn't gone through its process. So the only thing it sees is the emotions. And when the fear is running again and all the things like shame and sorrow and rejection, that's all the brain is accessing in here. And so it's making judgments and it's emotional reasoning. It feels not safe, so it's not safe. Everyone's unsafe. Everyone hates us. Nobody wants us. Those sorts of things start coming out. And what's problematic about that is with the loop running, we become more disconnected with reality. We have a harder time making connections with each other. And without our brain really understanding the exact things that occurred there, the reality pieces, we're losing our grounding in reality. And that's difficult. You know what I'm talking about, where like the grounding, you could see this in a spider phobia. The grounding in reality has left. Like, that's not a dangerous spider, but the nervous system is acting as if it is, that we're in imminent danger of death, right? Maybe it's a daddy long legs. I'm sorry if you have a spider phobia. I had one. I don't anymore, so I'm playing with all the words. But all of a sudden you're screaming, you're hysterical, this is not a reality-based situation. And your brain can't process the reality to make it grounded in reality. And so you're having, the more you interact with this, you're having more and more failures. And you're failing to participate in reality. And people are seeing this, you're noticing this, and you don't have a healthy way of being here. So if these things are running without processing, what's going to happen is the problem solving is not going to work, right? You're going to start avoiding things. You're going to start walking everywhere, maybe with a big fly swatter, your spider swatter. You're doing things that are a little odd because your problem solving is a bit off. Okay. And then we've got over here, all of these things start to become what our behaviors are made of. Right? So now not only do we have problem solving where we're like, we're going to avoid this. Now we're actually not going into the bathroom anymore. Now we're actually making somebody go with us every time. Right? Now we're doing behaviors. These then create interactions. Now we're having challenges with our partners because they're like, I don't want to go to the bathroom with you. You're a big person. You can go in there yourself. No, there's spiders, right? And imagine these are happening in more and more areas of your life and with other things that are associated with your specific trauma or the painful experiences that you had. These things become all these things that after decades seem to be disconnected from these things, but they're not. Right? So, but pretty soon you've got interactions, you've got new patterns, and you're starting to create these spirals of dysfunction that are becoming your character, who you are, what you're known for. Right? And actually just underneath it is just a trauma that didn't process. Okay, I want to show you the other piece of this so that it starts to really come together better. And really what we want is we want to break this loop. The brain can do better than just circling around here in emotions, emotional reasoning, judgments, right? There's nothing wrong with reasoning. There's nothing wrong with judgments. There's nothing wrong with stories. Brains do these things. But it's really dependent upon how much emotion is unprocessed in the event. This is the piece the brain has the most difficult time with because these are the things the brain is using to decide if we're safe or not safe. The survival system is responding to the emotions here because the emotions will register as pain in the brain or safety. And so the emotions of a traumatic experience register as pain, so we're shifting automatically into survival mode. And so we're not going to processing. It's not an automatic given that you're going to heal this. And it's not an accident that some people do and some people don't heal their traumas. There's this ingredient of that ignites and supports the brain to shift into processing mode, even while fear is moving through the system, is not is can be done intentionally, and in many systems, family systems, relationships, it's being done intentionally. And that is the divider between who heals and who doesn't. This is not an accident. This is not magic. This is science. This is if you mix H2 and O, you're going to get water. If you introduce safety that your survival system recognizes, you're going to get processing. That's it. So we don't actually need to feel into our traumas. We actually need to process our traumas, which is a very different process. Sometimes it's the same. But it's not about feeling into the trauma. It's about, can your brain process it? So we don't need to talk through all the stories. We don't need to feel through all the emotions. We need to process. We need processing. Okay. What we have here, right? We have the same thing. We have the trauma happened, and we have the emotions running, the emotional reasoning, judgment, stories, problem solving, and then we've got processing. So now this loop, instead of looping here, is actually opening. So we're going to get access to the next things. The brain will be able to create these. And this is objectivity, exploring other perspectives, effective problem solving, and success is beginning to increase. If you just do a little bit of processing to a trauma, you will still see these things increasing, and they might be super tiny. That's why when I'm teaching people to look for this stuff, you're looking for the little tiny ones. Sometimes you do some processing and the brain just starts rocking, and it's just all of a sudden done. And you're like, the door is unblocked and moving forward. And you're like, why didn't I see this before? Why didn't I see this solution before? It's just right there in your face. You just know it and you feel ready to go for it. Because your brain can quickly process these things. Sometimes it takes more support. It just really depends on what that person needs. But the more we get this thing more fully and more fully processed, the more objectivity we have, the more we're exploring other perspectives, the more we're problem solving. This exploring other perspectives is really important. It's the opposite of taking something personally, which is common in trauma responses. I just made a video about that last Friday, where I explored this in less complicated fashion than I am right now. However, being able to explore something from other people's perspective is a higher function of our brain, and it cannot be done in survival mode because it's not done in that part of the brain. So if you don't get your brain into a state where the whole brain is working together, because survival mode is about the survival system running and operating everything, and when we shift there, we're actually shutting down these other parts of the brain that do these functions. When we shift into processing, we're actually turning on the parts of the brain that do these functions. So when they're available, they just start happening automatically. This is what those brains do. These parts of the brain specialize in this. And if they get a hold of this material, because it's now processing, it's in the processing, it's moving farther into the factory, right? In the beginning, it was like coming out the door. Nope, you got to go into the survival factory. You're going over there. But this time the door is open to the processing factory, and those guys are doing all sorts of great things with this stuff. And you're getting higher functioning because these are parts of the brain that create that. And so all of a sudden, we're taking things personally less. We'll see this shift take place, right? Nope, let me do it like this. Okay, here it's full of emotion, right? But as we're processing, it starts to become this, all the other stuff in the trauma become available. And then it's less emotion because we just got some of that emotion processed, right? And so there's more objectivity, and you'll see this start happening the entire way, right? And pretty soon there's just a little bit left, and then there's nothing, right? And then what's in there, the emotion was processed all the way out, escorted through the healing factory and the processing factory. And the brains do lots of powerful things for that, but it also is how we create our higher emotion states, which is interesting because this was painful emotions and now it's becoming the material and the food for higher emotions and mood states. Brains convert this. That's what they do. It happens automatically. That's why we want this. I don't want you to be like, okay, be happy. Come on, be happy, Rachel. No, I want your brain making happiness for you. I don't want you to be like, okay, come on, be appreciative, be satisfied. No, I want you to make your brain to make appreciation and satisfaction for you. That's if you're doing that, you are witnessing the absence of your brain's ability to do this. And we want that built. We want that running. And we have to run these other parts of the brain enough to be able to do that. If you've been in survival mode a long time, these other parts of your brain haven't been able to cook. They haven't been able to do what they want to do. And your mind body system knows that. So it's constantly trying to get that to happen. And we want to help because your system, if your system can't go through its process of creating health and wellness, you don't get health and wellness. And you want that. So sometimes you got to just take a break and let your brain finish what it needs to finish. Right? And then if you're in the beginning of processing, this is going to be a chunk of time. It's going to be a chunk of effort. And then as it goes, it's going to turn in to this little guy right here where it's less effort. And your brain is just faster and faster and faster at this. Really, brains that are practiced at this go from this to this to this very, very quickly. And you want your brain really good at that. If your trauma processor got blocked as a young person, you're going to watch this be a slower process. We have to get your brain wired for this. And it wires for this by practicing. If you haven't practiced trauma processing, you don't have the wiring for it. And that's really one of the things that we're doing here. Okay. So what I want you to see here is that trauma processing, opens up all of these things. And really this success is really the thing we're looking for, right? This is what we're looking for: is successful parenting, successful relationships, successful businesses, successful promotions, successful work environments, success in every aspect of our life. Brains make this. That's what this entire video is about, is that this right here, this awesome thing you want, is what brains make. You're working on teamwork in your home. You're working on collaborative relationships with your children. Many of us are shifting from control models to collaboration models. We are super successful in control models, but we want to be successful in collaboration and synergy creation models with our children. That takes this. Your brain has to actually process those experiences of your own childhood, what you did last week with your kid, how you screwed up royally or not royally, or how you missed an opportunity, and really it's not just stop and making judgments about yourself and making up stories about I guess I'll never make it. I guess I'll never be good at that. I'm just going to stop having that conversation. Fine, I quit. I'm backing out. No, we want to process that so we get to objectivity, exploring the situation from multiple perspectives. How would your son like this? How would your daughter like this? How would your friend do this? Maybe you got a friend who's skillful in that. How would she do this? If this person was to witness you, what would they think, right? And what would they notice about this that you didn't catch this time? Many of us can't do that because it will create so much more emotional distress and pain that we'd start right back over here. But when you can do this, it's okay. You can do these things because your brain works and it does it. And it makes us have the courage to explore other perspectives. It makes us and then we get effective. This is addictive. Right here, this little jam right here is so addictive. When you start seeing yourself be more and more successful just because you're processing, this is wonderful. And your brain's making this and it's doing greater and greater combinations. That's it. In any area in your life that you are stuck, it's likely because your brain cannot process something. And this is deeper than just trauma processing. This is also emotional distress processing. Right? We have emotional distress about anything. And sometimes our system's good at this kind of distress and that kind of stress, but not that one. Disappointment, distress, fail, can't get it processed, too distressing. We're going to practice. We're going to support your brain with processing interventions and strategies to get that disappointment over onto this side. Because that's what needs to happen. It needs to go here. It doesn't need to disappointment, making a bunch of stories and judgments and about yourself and others in the world. No, get it processing so you get these other things as well. Disappointment is, while it's painful, it's also huge in helping us create lives of satisfaction. Okay, I have a video about that. It's awesome. Anyway, that's all. I just wanted you to think about that. This was complex. I'm sure I will make this video 3 more times and find simpler and simpler ways to share this information. But thank you for being here with me on my first effort in this. And I hope you got some valuable things from it. Okay, take care. Bye.